Hello there. In the dispute over high wages and secure jobs at the British Railways, the unions are sharpening the tone. The Conservative government is planning an attack on basic workers' rights. That's what the head of the umbrella organization Trades Union Congress, or TUC, Francis O'Grady, told the newspaper Financial Times. The General Secretary of the Railway Union RMT, Mick Lynch, threatened a general strike if the government significantly restricted the right to strike as announced. Then there will be the greatest resistance of the entire labour movement in history, Lynch said. The RMT and the train drivers' union ASLEF have repeatedly called on their members at the state network operator Network Rail and at several private rail companies to strike. On Wednesday, 40,000 employees stopped work and there were significant traffic problems across the country. The train drivers are on strike today as well, and both unions have also called for several days of strikes in August. They are demanding significant higher wage increases and job security. The British government refused to take part in the talks. Transport Minister Grant Shapps condemned the industrial action as militant and wants to enable strike-damaged companies to hire cheap temporary workers at short notice. And Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, candidate to succeed Prime Minister Boris Johnson, announced that she would break the power of the trade unions. The opposition also aroused the displeasure of employee representatives. After Labour Party Shadow Transport Secretary Sam Terry took part in an RMT picket against the wishes of party leader Keir Starmer and criticised government policies, he was sacked. The Labour Party, which is closely linked to the unions, said it always stands by the workers. However, appearances by top personnel would have to be coordinated. The unions reacted with outrage then. Britain needs real change and a real political alternative, but the Conservatives, with their mix of xenophobic populism, liberal economic policy, and British noblesse, have the country in a stranglehold. Things have gotten mixed up in Great Britain since the decision on Brexit at the latest, but basically since the announcement of the referendum by the then Prime Minister David Cameron. The formerly very liberal and pragmatic country is deeply divided between those who would have wanted to remain in the European Union and pro-Brexit supporters who were pushed into their decision by populist politicians such as Boris Johnson in campaigns that are on closer inspection implausible. In addition, cosmopolitanism and liberal thinking seems to have suffered considerably. The result of the 6 years since the referendum on Brexit with the decision to leave the EU is basically sad. First and foremost, the British political class appears irresponsible and unkempt from the outside. On the one hand, there are the many conservatives whose political statements are shaped by right-wing populism. But even the opposition Labour Party seems incapable of offering a counterweight here and exploiting the weakness of the Tories. For years they struggled with their leaders' open anti-Semitism and to this day cannot present themselves as a serious alternative to the ruling Conservatives. Since the referendum, the Conservatives have won one election, but have already seen 3 Conservative Prime Ministers resign, and that's not a success story. A few weeks after the referendum, David Cameron resigned and Theresa May took over. She ultimately failed due to the complex negotiations with the EU about the relationship between the United Kingdom and the EU, and that after Brexit. The exit was postponed several times. And finally, Boris Johnson, who had to resign a few weeks ago after a number of scandals, took over. The Economist spoke of clown fall. Economically, Brexit was not a success. Due to the increasing xenophobia in Great Britain in the course of the campaign, numerous employees from EU member states initially migrated. And the result was an enormous shortage of skilled workers. One still remembers the government's desperate appeals to the population to train as truck drivers after many Central European drivers left the country. British industry, which has already lost a lot of competitiveness and only seems to be strong in a very few technological niches, will be weakened by Brexit. And the London financial centre, on the other hand, remains very strong. Fears of a loss of importance there have not been fulfilled so far, but there was a pandemic in between. Brexit has also only done social damage. Because instead of things going uphill in the rural regions and, for example, the health system being refreshed as promised, the structurally weak areas are suffering even more than in the days of EU membership. I just say hello to Grimsby. The funds saved were not used to close particularly significant gaps. The social imbalance, again between town and country, seems to have worsened. It also shows that Great Britain was poorly prepared for Brexit. There was no expertise in the field of trade policy. But this was sorely needed because the government had to conclude many trade agreements with countries that have an agreement with the EU. And so they did a lot of copy and paste. Otherwise, the UK economy would have lost many benefits. It took years to finally build up this expertise. With a few exceptions, the great trade agreements promised by Boris Johnson with free trade and without socialist regulation frenzy from Brussels are still a long time coming. The negotiations with the EU also dragged on for a long time and have so far not brought any satisfactory results from their point of view, especially for Northern Ireland, although Northern Ireland got the best of both worlds, but they don't like it. Apparently, the Brexit supporters had also assumed that it would not come to that anyway. Many citizens seem to have regretted the Brexit decision for a long time. There have also been too many problems for that. In Scotland, there are still strong doubts about the unity of the kingdom, and not least because of this, the next referendum on the separation of the country from the United Kingdom is being planned. Then Boris Johnson would be responsible for turning Great Britain into Little England. He won't mind. One can assume that he would also have come up with a hearty comment on that one. However, his successor, the decision is still pending between the two candidates, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, or Dizzy Lizzy and Dishy Rishi, is likely to assess the situation differently. There are a lot of problems to be solved right now, so another administrative tour de force in connection with tough negotiations and the tearing apart of the centuries-old relationship would come at the wrong time for them. Because there are too many unanswered questions to be answered. In the race to succeed British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, favourite Liz Truss has received further momentum now. The popular Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, who is seen as a kingmaker, spoke out in favour of the Secretary of State in op-ed piece in the Times newspaper. Liz Truss is a winner not because of her salesmanship, but because of her authenticity. That's what Wallace wrote. She also has significantly more experience than her opponent Rishi Sunak in overcoming the current crisis. And Wallace harshly criticised Sunak. The former Chancellor of the Exchequer had let the country down when he resigned in protest at Johnson. That's what the Defence Secretary told Sky News. The reasoning follows Prime Minister Johnson's line. Sunak gets accused by those close to Johnson of being a murderer of kings or a kingslayer, of having overthrown the head of government with a stab in the back. But Sunak denies that. The two candidates for the leadership of the Conservative Party faced questions from Tory members for the first time a few days ago at a regional conference called Hustings, and that was in Leeds. Truss received more applause. Numerous other hustings are planned until the end of August. Party members can cast their votes from Monday. The result is to be announced on September 5th. The winner then also moves to Downing Street. In addition to the geopolitical problems which Great Britain, in contrast, for example, to us Germans, is still able to tackle in a sovereign statesman-like manner, which are therefore the least cause for concern from outside, there are the high inflation rate, increasing social turmoil, the emigration of many EU citizens who occupied important jobs, as well as the state finances. Especially on the last point, the two candidates obviously have different views. On the other hand, the government's EU-critical stance will not change much after the change of government at the beginning of September. And so the damage for the kingdom will continue as well. I'll see you in my next video. Ich komme wieder.